So, I'm here to introduce you, the Dread Pirate of Robert's Rules of Order, a.k.a. Niklas.
This is not your ordinary Robert's Rules of Order. This is the Dread Pirate Robert's Rules of Order. And for this, I'm going to need some participation from our audience. I've already set some people up for it. And I want everybody else to participate as we go, and I'll explain how you can do that. Now, I know there's some people here who know Robert's Rules of Order far better than I do. So if I misstate something, you just raise your hand and we'll correct it. So let's get started. Now, as you know, many years ago, the pirates, they had their ships, and they frequently had debates on the ship. And they called meetings together to decide precious things, like, you know, which city to plunder, or how many damsels they would capture this week. But the thing was that these things often, with the alcohol and stuff, they usually ended up pretty bad. They didn't quite have the spirit of cooperation that was needed for a crew. So why do we have rules? We have these rules to make sure that the meetings are held on time and in the most efficient manner possible with the least amount of animosity caused, because we don't want things like this to happen. Let's see. All right, so. Holly, would you sit still? So, let's get started with some basic definitions. A quorum. A quorum is the minimum numbers of members you need to have business transacted. Typically, it's 51%, sometimes it's 66%, depends on your rules. But you can't just drag the cleaning lady in and expect to get a quorum. You have to be voting members. A constitution. Constitution is the basic rules that your organization is based upon. Now, the screen I just had there showed the Constitution for my original ancestors set these rules up. Black Bart Roberts? Right. And he was in the 16 to 1700s, one of the more successful pirates. And as you know, being a pirate Robert is a franchise. We'll discuss that later. Bylaws are the basic definitions. They're typically, you can fill rooms with the books of bylaws generated from a constitution. And a motion is a proposal that actions be taken. They can be good, they can be benign, they can be highly discussed, but it's a call for the group to take some sort of action. And, of course, there's a basic order of precedence within Robert's Rules. You can't just bring up any rule at any time. For instance, before we had a motion and an amendment, you can't vote on the motion without voting on the amendment first, because otherwise you wouldn't know what you're doing. So there is an order to things. You can't recess and end the meeting before you have all the orders of business done. So you have to know what the rules are for the order. And of course, we have a presiding officer. Some of us are better at it than others. Our basic job is to have you conduct the meetings as quickly, as efficiently as possible, to keep order to things, but not to interfere with what you're trying to accomplish. So the presiding officer ideally should not take part in discussions of motions. He should just rule whether something is legal or not. If he needs to debate a particular motion, he can hand over the meeting to someone else for the length of that motion, and then he can come from the floor as just another participant. And there are rules governing that. So there's 6 main steps in handling a motion. The first is, of course, a member stands up and says, I move. And then they tell us what they want to do. Another member then seconds it. The reason you do this is because otherwise we'd have people just saying stuff all over the time, and we'd have to vote and everything else. If you have a person seconding, that means at least 2 people think it's a good idea. You can't just throw out anything and take up the entire meeting with it. After the motion is presented and somebody seconds that motion, then the presiding officer repeats the motion as expressed by the person that made the motion in the first place, and everybody then starts a debate. Open up for debate. Usually the person that is presenting the motion will stand up first and give a reason why they want this motion to pass. Then you would invite people with an opposite viewpoint, is there any other viewpoints on it, to express what they would think of the motion, whether it's good or bad. And you go back and forth between positive and negative as much as you can. Finally, if there aren't any other motions put forth that interfere with that, you would vote on the motion. That's the basic steps. Of course, once the vote is in, the presiding officer then says the vote was for or against. So let's get to our first demonstration. What we will do is I'll have my crew pre-assigned here, that they will bring up a motion and they will second it. Then they will present some reasons why, and then I will open the floor up to debate. And feel free to bring out your inner pirate and debate this as much as you'd like. I'd like to have a little bit of fun at this point. I call on the ship's officer, aka timer, to give us 5 minutes maximum for debate. And my crew, if they sense that debate is waning down, they will call for the end of debate. So, would someone like to propose something? And please state your name and role.
I'm the ship's wench and the crack gunner's mate. And I make a motion that we distribute a cup of rum per sailor.
Here's a second to that motion. That motion. So here's a second?
Second.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we'll open this up for debate. Why should we do this?
'Cause I'm thirsty. And it's a good idea. Makes for a happier meeting.
Yes.
I'm just a cabin boy. If Mum doesn't like me to drink on Sunday, and when you go get drunk, you make a bigger mess, it makes more work for me too. I don't like it.
Any other debate on the subject? Yes.
I don't think you should be drinking while sailing. Not only is it against the law of the sea and the order, but you're liable to drop it all on a racking boat and lose the whole thing. I recommend all you lovers give your drinks to me. I'll take care of it.
Any other debate? Yes.
I'm all for it. Wait, I'm not done. I want pineapple juice in an umbrella.
That would be a, we'll get to that later.
As a captured damsel on this ship, I want you to know that you sailors become too rowdy when you're drinking. I would be opposed to such action.
I be the quartermaster, cook, and surgeon of this ship. Me moves to table the question and allow the lesson to continue.
All right, we have a motion to table it. And that requires 50% of the crew. Would we all vote? All in favor of tabling the motion? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Say arg. All right, let's get back to our lesson. The types of motions. We have the introduction of new business. That you can't have a motion on old business, you have a motion on new business, or you have an existing motion that you can bring back. And then we have subsidy motions. Those are things that call for action on the motion itself. Then there are privileged motions, and these are calls for action which do not directly involve the motion in hand, but require some attention from the congregation. Then we have incidental questions, and this is something like somebody asking, what is rum? That would be an incidental question. And finally, we have special calls. There's only a few of these, and they're generally outside of, after a motion has been passed and somebody has some new information or feels that something was done wrong, they can call a special call motion. We have our subsidy motions. These are the ones that are right after in order of precedence from the motion itself. First one is to lay on the table. That means to put it aside for something more important, like the remainder of my speech. To call the question, which is to stop the debate and end it and have the vote right then and there. To limit or extend the time of debate. You've seen this in Congress, in the Senate, where somebody will put in a 30 or 40-hour speech on a debate in order to extend it, and then the Congress was forced to, someone gets up and votes for a limit on that debate, and they cut it off. And you can also postpone a motion for another time. Like, say you have something where additional information is needed, or there isn't a quorum there to vote, you can lay it on the table, postpone consideration until later. You can also refer something to a committee. Maybe you have a party and beverage committee for your rum, and you want to give them the decision-making on it. You also have amendments to a motion. Like you were saying before, you wanted to amend that motion, and that's where that would come in. We'll be taking that up shortly. And finally, you can postpone something indefinitely. If you don't want to vote on it, you know it's going to look bad for you, so you bring up a motion to postpone it indefinitely, and that basically says, just let it die and maybe it'll go away.
Kind of like me.
No, Polly. All right, let's get to demonstration number 2. In demonstration number 2, the crew will bring up and second amendments. Debate is again open to all crew members. Debate is limited to 30 seconds apiece, and the ship's officer will time 5 minutes. So do we hear any? We have this motion on the floor to give everybody 1 cup of rum in the crew. And we were in the middle, we had just had the debate on it. So we'll bring that motion back up and go back into our meeting. Any further debate on it? Or motions to amend that?
Ooh, we're running low.
Yes. Yes, Captain Lloyd?
I think that It might be okay if they had some every day, if we watered it down by half.
Oh.
That would be my minute. They can have some every day, but it's got to be watered down a bit.
Okay. Yes,
I say we throw the cabin boy overboard.
that's out of order.
That's not an amendment, that's an outright threat.
Yes,
I hear Captain Morgan's about to sail and he's loaded down to the bevy with rum. I say we lay off, wait for him to come around the scuttlebutt and take him down and take the rum.
okay, we have an amendment to it, to first attack Captain Morgan. Do I hear a second to that amendment?
Second.
Second? Any debate on that? Any debate on taking down Captain Morgan?
If we're gonna take down Captain Morgan, we should have two drinks a day.
You read my script.
I like that.
Do I hear a second? Okay, we have a motion for 2 drinks after taking down Captain Morgan. Do we have a second on that?
I second the motion.
All right. I'd like to make a motion that we include crackers. I'm sorry, we have a motion and we have an amendment and a secondary amendment. We cannot allow tertiary amendments. Sorry,
All right.
Polly. Just 2 amendments to any particular motion. You can then vote on those and then bring another amendment back later, but you can only have 2 at one time. Otherwise it gets too confusing, it gets too deep. And like grabbing one of those Jenga things out of the bottom.
Right.
All right, now, we have our second motion. The secondary motion is to amend the amended motion, which says we will have 2 cups of rum after taking down Captain Morgan's ship. Call for a vote. Do I hear a call for a vote on that?
So we vote right now.
All right. All in favor of the amendment to have 2 cups of rum?
Aye.
Aye.
That passes. Okay. Now it's back to the amendment for taking down Captain Morgan's ship. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. That motion passes. And finally, the complete motion. The motion to have 2 cups of rum after taking down Captain Morgan's ship for every crew member. All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I don't really like it.
So
We
the-
threw him overboard.
What happened to throwing the damn cabin boy overboard?
That's a secondary, that is a different subject and must be taken up as a complete new
Point
motion.
of order.
Oh.
Does the cabin boy get the vote?
Yes, the captain boy is a member of the crew, he gets to vote.
And another reason to throw him overboard.
Clean your own cabin.
Hold on to that, we will take that in our next session. The next thing we have is privileged motions. Is your head spinning yet?
Yes.
Okay, good.
It's all that rum.
We need some rum about now.
Privileged motions. The first one is time to adjourn. And that basically says, you know, we need to adjourn by sundown or we won't be able to see where the ship's going. So you would vote, somebody would say, and it does not have to follow the meeting, it doesn't have to follow the motion itself. You could be discussing and debating an issue like how many cups of rum, and somebody notices it's getting dark, so they would make a motion to fix the time to adjourn to sundown. A motion to adjourn, which is immediate. And that says, let's adjourn the meeting right now, and everything gets tabled and we just stop. These are all motions that need to have votes on them. Then there's a motion to recess. Recess is always fun, especially if you're in kindergarten. And basically, we're going to suspend everything and take a break for something that's more immediately important. Like maybe another ship is coming and you have to fend off the borders. Or it's time for a 5-minute break so everybody can go drink their rum. Something like that.
Or get rid of the old rum.
Yes. And to raise a question of privilege. Now this says that you feel like you or a group of members are not being treated fairly. Like maybe you're too close to the doors and there's a wild party going on next door and you can't hear the meeting. Or, you know, if you're in shackles down in the hold and you're not allowed to attend, that somebody could bring up a question of privilege to say those person, you know, they're not being treated fairly and we need to respect them according to everybody else. There's a call for orders of the day, and that basically says that you're looking at your agenda and what we're doing is out of order. It's not, we're supposed to be doing old business and somebody's trying to propose new business. That would be a call for the order of the day, and it just says, hey, are we in order?
Right.
And wait until the proper time to present what you're doing. And then there are incidental motions. Incidental motions don't have anything to do with the motion necessarily directly. They are points of order, which basically says that, you know, we need to put this in its proper place. To appeal, if you feel like I'm misjudging a rule, you can appeal the rule and say, you know, we can't take up this motion because we haven't finished voting on the amendment to it yet. That's an appeal. A point of information, you could point out that the rum has been watered down, and that would affect others, because that's going to affect the judgment of the people as they're voting, but it doesn't directly change the motion itself. A suspension of rules. This is when the rules prohibit you from doing something you need to get done. For instance, we just had one here today. Our rules say that you must have a CC to be a member of the club. We had a suspension of rules in the last meeting when we proposed this, so we could have an honorary member who isn't a CC. To object to the consideration of a question. Basically, this is saying, that's a stupid question. Do we even have to bother debating it? Can we have a vote to just get rid of the entire question? And you can do that at any time. Also, a division of the question, which basically says, we've got this 3,000-page healthcare bill. Can we break it up into sections and vote on it individually instead of the entire bill? And also consideration by paragraph. And that's basically saying we've got this huge piece of legislation and all right, now we can get into demonstration number 3. And we can pass those out, please.
Right.
This is our little cheat sheet. For demonstration number 3, this is going to be totally improv, no suggestion from me. We're going to have maybe a new motion or several motions and try to use as many of these as we possibly can. Now if you look at that sheet, you'll notice, it's kind of hard for me to point out here, but the first 10 are in order of precedence, meaning that number 1 is the highest order of precedence. It comes before anything else. Number 2, likewise, all the way down to number 10. And then the subsidy motions, and the main motion, of course, is the original motion to start with. Incidental motions can come at any time. And also, after the vote is completed, you have the vote to rescind or the vote to reconsider. All right, do I have any motions on the floor? Yes,
Aye, since we belong to the Dread Pirates crew, we'd like to look our best. So I make a motion that we all buy those nice frilly pirate shirts for all of us to wear.
any seconds for that?
I'll second that motion.
All right. Any debate? Would you like to tell us why we should have those shirts?
Because we want to look better than the other pirates.
All right.
And because we only own one shirt.
Any debate on it?
And the shirt will look mighty fine with a glass of rum.
Yes.
Any debate on the issue?
Can we have the cabin boy wear a pink one?
Yes.
What color would it be?
That's fine, Mike, it's fine. I'd like to make an amendment that if we do get shirts like this, that we do all wear the same colour. They look really nice, they look like a team.
You want team shirts?
That's an amendment right there.
Yeah. Your amendment is to change it to team shirts.
Right, the same
Okay.
colour, right?
A secondary amendment, why we hang the damn cabin boy?
That is not part of what we are considering. However, you can bring that up later. All right, we have an amendment. We have an amendment to our original. And any debate on the amendment that we should all have team shirts? Yes.
We can make an amendment to suspend the rules so we can hang the cabin boy.
Oh, man.
Well, that would fall under not being able to hang anyone without a trial. So we'll get to that. That's still a separate issue from whether or not we have team shirts. Unless we want to hang the cabin boy with a team shirt, which would be different.
Can we refer to the committee about the hanging of the...
Well, we'll get back. We're not on this. That's a separate subject. We'll get back to the cabin boy. We'll get back to the cabin boy. Let's address these shirts first. Yes.
I think team shirts would be a great idea, and I think they should have big AAs on the front, and it would look mighty fine with our cups of wine.
There you go.
All right.
I can get behind that.
Okay, so that would be a motion to have AA printed on the shirt.
Right.
So, do we have more discussion? Maybe refer to a committee? Anything?
There's a boat. Captain Ralph Lauren is pirating. Full of shirts. Totally pirate shirts and different colors. I say we go after it.
All right. We have a motion to go after Captain
Ralph Lauren.
Ralph Lauren's, the French captain, Captain Ralph Lauren, and to get shirts, and that would be shirts with
Flurry things, pirate shirts.
Team pirate shirts
All right.
from the ship. Yes.
Point of order. Isn't there already a motion on the floor?
Yeah.
How can he bring another motion?
Well, it would be an amendment to the motion.
We already have two.
We have two? Yes, we do.
Yeah.
That's right. You'll have to suspend that.
Call to
Okay,
order.
so-
Call the question.
Call the question. Okay, so we vote for having AA printed on our team shirts if we approve that motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now we're back to having two, so we can bring up your motion to attack Captain Ralph Lauren's ship so we can get those shirts. All in favor of attacking Captain Ralph Lauren's ship?
Aye.
The French aren't as tough as the Spanish. Okay, that motion passes. Now we go back to having team shirts. The original motion was for having shirts, and this will be team shirts. All in favor of having team shirts?
Quite right.
All opposed to having team shirts?
I win.
Is anybody going to vote on the team shirts at all?
I move,
You didn't
we
even
hang
vote,
the
you didn't
wino
even-
damsel next to the teetotaling cabin boy.
Okay, we have a vote. Do we want to vote on the team shirts, or should we just table the entire topic?
Table the top.
Table the topic.
All right, Michelle, table that. And now, any new business?
I hang the wino damsel next to the teeth-toting cabin boy.
All right, we have a motion to hang 2 crew members. Now, this is out of order. According to the rules, we have to have the trial for them. Should we suspend?
I motion to suspend the rules.
Okay, suspend the rules to allow hanging without a trial. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Now we have the original motion. Shall we have some debate on that motion? Why should we hang them?
Hang them side by side. Get rid of them.
Why? Give me some-
Why?
Why not?
We'll be serving us
We're wrong.
rum if the lucky to bank and the quarter boy behind.
We're
Any
pirates,
other
not
motion? Any
winos.
other
Right,
objection?
if you kill me, you have to clean your own clothes, you have to fold, you need to clean up your own place. You don't want to do that. You'll be living in squalor, you won't get cholera, you'll die too. So you got to keep me around.
Get rid of them.
If you want.
We need an extra cabin for more rum.
Yeah. There you
The
go.
cabin boys, so we got space.
Any other? Polly wants a cracker. No crackers, they're not part of it.
Call for a quick recess then.
Vote for the recess? All in favor of recess? All opposed to recess?
Ah.
Now, want you to notice something? We only had, everybody else abstained, we have 1 vote for. The vote carries.
Oh,
One
I'm
vote against.
kinda-
That was one vote against.
was that against the?
Against the recess.
Against the recess.
Yeah.
So,
So he carries.
Call a
we
question.
will not have a recess.
Call a question.
We'll call the question. All in favor of hanging the damsel in distress and the cabin boy?
Aye.
The motion carries. It will be hung at the end of the meeting. Film at 11.
We call the fixed time of the meeting to end December 31st, 2074.
We have a motion to suspend the time of the hanging until 2007 or 2076, whatever.
We'll hang you fast.
So well after they're dead. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Yeah.
The motion carries. We will hang you this week.
Unless we find time.
You're gonna get me in 60 years. Now we're all stuck in this.
All right, let's just review some of the special problems. What can you do if you take an action and then you decide later it's a bad thing to do?
Kill him.
You can recall the motion and then bring it up for debate again and revote and then vote on it, maybe vote against it. Like we don't want to kill the cabin boy.
That's right, you do.
You can so for these two, you can reconsider the motion or rescind it altogether. Can a motion be adopted when many members abstain?
Yes.
Yes,
Ah,
as long as the quorum is there. If they abstain, the members can. Can a member be required to vote? No. They cannot be required to vote. They can abstain. Can a motion be carried by a plurality vote? Which basically just says, like if you were doing an email and only certain people responded, the others didn't respond at all. Normally, no. You have to have, because that implies you wouldn't have a quorum that way. by implication just by sending out an email. But you can suspend the rules for that and allow it. But that, again, would require a full vote.
Question.
Yes?
How do you determine whether or not to have a debate if you do not have a quorum?
I do not know that. I can find out. But I would believe that if you don't have a quorum, you can't really conduct business. So you wouldn't be able to place a motion to have a debate on it. That would be my take.
Yeah, without
And
a
it-
quorum, I guess you could debate unofficially that way.
I mean, yeah, you could talk about it, but you couldn't actually bring up the motion to have a debate on it. Okay, can a presiding officer participate in debate? Not as the presiding officer. They can hand it off. For instance, if I wanted to decide whether we should have rum or not, I could have handed off to Polly. I could have sat down as a member of the group and then offered my suggestions. I could not come back up as president until after the motion was voted on. So Polly would be running the meeting and we'd all be in real trouble. Can a presiding officer introduce a motion?
No.
No, not directly.
Right.
They can say, do I hear a motion? And request that somebody make a motion, but they can't directly make the motion themselves. And what is an ex officio member?
Nikki?
Generally, an ex officio member is somebody with high standings who is automatically considered a member, like Nikki.
Question.
Yes?
Is there a specific thing to say when you're making a motion?
Not, you don't absolutely have to say it, but generally they say, I move that. That is the general. Okay, and after that, I remind you that the little chart you've got there, if you look at it a little bit, it'll start to make a little bit of sense. And you can kind of follow, think about it as that Jenga stack, where if you pull something out from the middle, the whole thing comes down. So you want to put one piece of a motion on top of another. You can't have an amendment without a motion. You can't vote to suspend the rules if you don't have something to suspend the rules about. So the order of precedence there is from the highest to the lowest, and that'll help you with that. You won't get motion sickness. Don't try to get into it so deeply that you end up with motion sickness, trying to get into every fine detail. We'll leave that to Congress. Any questions, comments?
Do we have enough rope?
I got some in my car. Yes.
If during a business meeting, say our elections that took place a few minutes ago, I realize now that I did some things wrong, but that does not in any way negate the weight or the legality of what occurred during the meeting, correct? Even if the procedural mistakes were made.
Right. As far as I know, if nobody objects during the meeting and the meeting is closed, unless we find out we don't have a quorum, or members were intentionally excluded from knowing about the meeting, something like that would be external to the meeting itself. As long as we have a quorum and everything is done to the best of our abilities.
Related to that, if, let's say, you start your meeting and then there's motions that are presented and somebody who's obviously not winning the debate decides to leave and breaks quorum, can business continue?
That is a good question. I don't know.
So I'm gonna leave the room and you can't have a business meeting. Can you do that?
I think they can.
I thought the quorum, my understanding of the quorum is you take the quorum at the beginning of the meeting and they're considered present. at the meeting, even if they leave. That is the way I understand it.
So
I might
once
be
you're
wrong on
counted
that.
for, then.
You're
it's-
counted.
it's-
Yeah,
it's
you're counted.
accounted for.
So if there's a vote, then you're counted as an abstain?
Right.
Right.
That's the way I.
The reason why I actually asked this question is because I don't know how many of you guys actually watch House of Cards. Huge fan of House of Cards. It's on Netflix. That problem happened, so all the senators for the opposing side started leaving the room. So the chair, or the presiding chair of the meeting, had every member of the Senate sequestered, arrested, brought back in because they were present at the beginning. So you
Oh.
can't continue a meeting until they're back in the room.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So
That's good.
just a little trivia.
No.
Good to know, okay. Yeah, this
Wow.
thing does not go into that detail.
I just thought that was
And I didn't read the entire 107 pages of Robert's Rules.
So if we leave, then you're gonna have us arrested.
Yes.
Put a cup of rum.
Or kill
We send the sergeant of arms out. Now, stand up a second, Matt. We're gonna send the sergeant at arms out to arrest Matt. Okay.
There's only weapon being.
In theory. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll turn it back over to our president. Now you're all qualified to be Dread Pirate Roberts. If you'd like to talk about franchises afterwards, I can assign you a ship.
All right.